And welcome back to the 920 podcast, MLB Draft Edition. This will be another two-part series just like we did last summer. And our leadoff batter, none other than Dan Zielinski from Baseball Prospect Journal. Dan, you and I have been talking a lot this week. It's up. We are up to bat with the MLB Draft, just a couple of days away. You mentioned off air that kind of snuck up on us a little bit, but it's here. And you know as well as anybody that these last couple of days, a lot of draft chatter comes in. So it's an exciting time of the year, and we're here to talk about the Vols, a little bit of Braves. That's why I've got the Braves regalia all over the place. And, of course, Brewers. And Dan is all things Milwaukee Brewers, and not only just the MLB Draft, but is deep into the Brewers organization in terms of info and knowledge and insight. And it couldn't be a more appropriate time to talk about that when you intersect Tennessee Volunteers and Milwaukee Brewers, because Andrew Fisher and Blake Burke are in Knoxville right now playing the Tennessee Smokies. So, Dan, just your thoughts on what those two prospects mean to the organization and their development so far in pro baseball.
Yeah, both guys have been extremely exciting to watch so far throughout their pro careers. Obviously, Andrew Fisher was a first-round pick last year for the Brewers, so there's a little extra expectations on him with that, and he's kind of really moving through the system quickly. If he wasn't probably in the Brewers organization, I think they'd be a little bit more aggressive with him. But he's having a really nice year, spent some time at high A and now at double A. And Blake Burke, he just continues to do what he did at Tennessee, and that's hit the baseball a long ways. So both guys are really exciting. It's kind of funny because the Brewers for a while there struggled to find a first baseman that was consistent and produced at a high level, and now it seems like they have two guys at the major league level who can do that in Andrew Vaughn and Jake Bauers, but they still need a third baseman. They haven't been able to solidify that third base spot in years, so I still think both guys are probably a year away from the major leagues at this point, but definitely exciting players to dream on here in the upcoming years.
Dan, Andrew Fisher had a really good spring in the World Baseball Classic, playing for, gosh, who was it? I can't even remember who it was.
Italy.
He played for
Italy.
Thank you. Yes. Really opened some eyes there, and obviously that was a good event for him to show what he can do. Yeah. Any chance the Brewers maybe use him as trade bait, if to fill needs this year? The Brewers are for real. They've got a shot. So any chance either of those guys really are part of a deal coming up in the next few weeks?
That's a great question, because the Brewers have historically been pretty conservative at the trade deadline, especially when it comes to their top prospects. Now, the positive for the Brewers is they're loaded with prospects. They got the number one farm system in baseball. They have well over 5 top 100 guys, and Andrew Fisher and Blake Burke aren't even mentioned in that. I think if one of them would get traded, Blake Burke's probably the more likely, just because from an organizational needs standpoint, third base is really kind of an area, like I said, they've struggled with for some time. I don't know if they really view Jake Bauers and Andrew Vaughn as franchise cornerstones at first base, but they've produced the last 2 years, so it's hard to move on from a guy that has consistently produced at the major league level for an unknown. So I think Blake Burke maybe would be the more likely guy to get traded. But again, we'll see with the Brewers. They don't like trading these guys that are top producers who are close to the major league level. So I'll be curious. I'm not convinced the Brewers are going to go all in at the deadline, but we'll see.
Has anything surprised you with either prospect, or is it about what you expected when you look at the path that they've taken to this point?
Overall, I think it's what I expected. I think Andrew Vaughn moving relatively quickly through the system maybe surprised me. I don't know if I expected him to just completely dominate high A right away and really not run into really any hiccups. Like I said, I think the Brewers historically with their prospects have been very conservative. They don't like to rush them through the minor leagues. So if he was like in a different organization, Andrew Fisher, I think he could maybe make it to the major leagues this year, but the Brewers just have never historically done that before, where they really moved a guy quickly through the system like that. So I just think that with the way he's produced, I think come next year that he's definitely going to get some looks come spring training. And definitely I would expect both or one of them to be in the major leagues at some point next year.
Blake Burke, grew up in the Tennessee program, and Andrew Fisher was at some other programs and then transferred over, and his college career just ascended. We've seen that a little bit with the Tennessee baseball program. In terms of this draft and whether it's Vol targets in the transfer portal, the high school ranks, or current Vols like a Tegan Coons, who are some of your favorite Vols or UT commits in this draft?
Yeah, that's a great question because even with the coaching change, Tennessee still has a lot of great guys for this year's draft, whether that's who's signed to the program or currently at Tennessee. One of my favorite prospects in this year's class is Trevor Condon, the outfielder from Georgia, the high school ranks. Just a really exciting player overall. Speaking with him, he's got a great kind of mindset. I love his approach and philosophy and confidence overall that he shows both just naturally and on the field. Guy that's a left-handed hitter, not the biggest guy, but something that is definitely an area he's working on in terms of adding muscle. He's about 5'11", 180 pounds, but he's just really an exciting player. Center fielder who can hit for average, above average to elite speed, and really makes a difference in that regard too. So I really like Trevor Condon. I think he's how underrated can a guy be when he's going to be probably a top 15 pick, but I still think he's a little bit underrated when it comes to that regard. I just really like him and what he brings to a field and a team. So I'm excited to see kind of where he goes in the draft. And obviously Tegan as well, right-handed pitcher from Tennessee. He's been a guy that this year I think flew a little bit under the radar and, wasn't maybe necessarily some of those premium pitching prospects that at least a name recognition that Tennessee's had in the past. Obviously, Garrett Crochet is a big one, but other guys in the mix. But he's just a guy that produces and has a really exciting pitch mix as well with the above average fastball and breaking pitch. I think once he can really figure out a third pitch, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a major league starter for many years to come. And another guy I think is going to be a first round pick here coming in a couple days. So Tennessee's got some exciting guys. And one guy I didn't even mention was Jared Gridlinger.
That's the one I was getting ready to say. Yeah. How can we forget this guy? Yeah.
The left-handed pitcher outfielder from California. I personally like him better on the mound. I just think he's got more upside. He's a little more polished maybe, or at least has it more figured out at this point. I still think there's some work to be done with the hit tool from the left side there for him. But he's a guy that how can you not like? But definitely those three guys I think are names to watch. All will be first round picks, and it's just frankly a matter of how high they go at this point.
As far as the SEC as a whole, this year, I mean, what a year it was. The conference just stood out again, and lo and behold, it was Oklahoma at the end of the day that hoisted the trophy in Omaha. But still a lot of prospects to go around. I saw a ton out here in Knoxville, Lindsey Nelson Stadium, also in Hoover. But from your seat, Dan, what SEC standouts are you circling for the top of the draft?
Yeah, I really like Tyler Bell. I know he dealt with the injury right away early on in the season. And this is a guy that maybe is not the most flashiest of players, but he's a guy that just does everything really well. Former Illinois high school player, so someone being in the Midwest I've been familiar with for some time. And he went to Tennessee, produced, and he's a guy that could be a top 10 pick. I still think there's a chance he could be even a top 5 pick potentially. But just switch hitter, really strong defensively at shortstop, someone who will stick at that position long term, can hit for average, has quality plate discipline, doesn't swing at pitches out of the zone. His power is respectable in that regard, but I think just his ability to do everything really good across the diamond is something that stands out to me, and someone that I think is really well polished for being a little bit younger for the class, and someone that I think still has some room to grow as well. I'm curious to see Justin LeBron, the shortstop from Alabama, where he ends up going. Very polarizing prospect, a guy that entered the year maybe as the number 1 prospect and now could be a guy that maybe ends up in the 20s in the draft. I still think he probably is a first round pick, at least will receive first round money, just because the intangibles are so exciting, but the struggles he had in SEC play, hitting 229, just it's hard to take a guy that early in the draft when he's essentially facing not major league, professional pitching in the SEC most nights, and he struggled. So, but again, defensively, he's elite, has really great, speed, and going to make an impact in that regard. But the question is, can he get on base to use that speed? So I'm curious to see what happens there. And what's interesting too is some of the pitching coming out of the SEC in my evaluation of these guys. Hunter Dietz, the left-hander from Arkansas, and then you also got Cade Townsend too. Usually the SEC is known for pitching and producing some big arms. This year is not necessarily the case in terms of at least early round guys, but those are two guys I'm kind of curious to see where they go in the draft. There's been, especially of late, scouts are a little bit concerned about their track record, injury history, some of the production out of Cade Townsend, especially later on in the year. So I'm curious to see where those two guys go. I still think at least Dietz will be a first-round pick, even with the arm issues. Townsend probably won't have to wait too long to hear his name called. But just something interesting to watch, especially with the way the SEC has produced pitching in recent years, and for those to be two of their top arms coming into the draft. We'll see where they go.
Well, in terms of our team mock draft at Baseball Prospect Journal, then we had 12 picks in a row from college, and 5 of those were SEC players. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But for those that want to check it out, Dan just posted it, and it's live on baseballprospectjournal.com. Dan and I just alternated, went back and forth on who we would select, and we gave some potential reasonings and some surprise thoughts, things of that nature, down at the end of the article. And I just thought it was interesting because there were some surprises, and like you mentioned, that you may not have a Paul Skeens or a top line, no doubt, top 10 pitcher from the SEC like we've seen in the past, but you've got your Liam Petersons. You mentioned Dietz and Townsend. I saw Townsend. Townsend was probably the second best pitching performance I saw at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, the first being Tegan Kuhn's in his 15 strikeout performance. So I feel like once you get to that, you kind of referenced it, the picks 20 on into 30 in the back end of that first round, those slots are kind of interchangeable with teams and organizations looking that have a taste for college players. And it's kind of, what's your flavor, right?
Right. Definitely. I think this year, the first round is going to be college heavy. Part of that has to do with just the way teams prefer in general. Teams are moving prospects quicker and quicker through the farm systems. And in order to do that, most of the time you have to take a college guy, but also just with the way the draft has kind of fallen with the top guys, it really is kind of a college heavy draft. But I think even, come pick 12 to 15 there, we start to see a lot of parity. You see a lot of college hitters that are relatively similar, and you're kind of nitpicking and more or less going with the guy you prefer the most. Even you'd mentioned Liam Peterson. He's a guy that I've always liked, but he just never has put it fully together at Florida. So he's another guy that's kind of, teams can be excited about him, but there's also a lot of questions too. So, I'm curious to see how these position players stack out. You talked about our staff draft, and it kind of showed there with the college hitters that, these guys are interchangeable. I mean, like Zion Rose, I know he's not SEC, but he's, one of the top college hitters from Louisville. He's a guy we had go 22 in our staff mock draft, but he's a guy that could go anywhere from late teens to early 30s. And there's even like a guy I mocked to the Brewers in Sawyer Strasnider, the outfielder from TCU. He's a guy that could go in the teens, or he's going to go late in the 20s, just because, again, there's so much parity among these guys that it really comes down to what you prefer, what you value, some of the metrics and analytics, and what you think you can also tweak with your player development. So really interesting to see how it plays out. I think the top 5 prospects, I should say, are pretty solidified there. I don't know if those guys will go in the first 5, but once you kind of get after that, it starts to really shake up. And then once you get into that third tier, it really is kind of a pick your flavor.
You talked about the SEC this year. Incredibly, the 11 seed in Hoover ends up being your national champion. So again, just underscores how loaded the SEC is, and really no surprise we're going to see a ton of SEC picks again this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too because UCLA just dominated the regular season too, and everyone thought maybe this could finally be the year a non-SEC school wins it all, and UCLA lays an egg in the first weekend. They're out, and then Oklahoma just got hot and played really well. It's just really impressive. I'm curious to see too with the CBA and what impact that has on the draft, where we could see more high school guys potentially getting to college, because that's only going to benefit the SEC even more. Right. So I really like, what the SEC offers. Teams love what the SEC offers because it's essentially like a minor league development program at this point for these guys. So you kind of know a little bit what you're getting from these guys, where if you take a guy from, say, a mid-major or one of these lower level Power Fives, you don't necessarily know what you're fully getting because of the competition they played against.
Yeah, Logan and I talked back before the selection Monday, I guess it was, in the tournament. UCLA, they went 28-2, but we wondered between us, we had the discussion, how is that going to show up playing a Big Ten schedule? Because frankly, they just didn't see a lot of competition in Big Ten play. So, and I think we saw the result of that. They just didn't look sharp come tournament time at all. And as far as Oklahoma, Skip Johnson's as good a coach as there is out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, he does it with not as much resources as a lot of the SEC teams have. So even more impressive. So yeah, it's crazy what the SEC does year in and year out.
Dan, you referenced the upcoming CBA, and what's your thoughts on a couple of prospects I'm going to mention? You talked about Grenlinger. I'll bring up Rocco Maniscalco. Those are guys that changed classes to hop into this draft. Now, Grenlinger's a first rounder, whether it's this draft class or next year's. As stacked as next year's class is going to be, I'm almost certain it's not going to be 20 rounds. It's going to be shorter than that. But Grenlinger's a first rounder either way. But do you think the unknown of the upcoming CBA affected those top prospects that switch classes?
Maybe not. I don't know. It's tough to say because I think part of it has to also do with the NIL component as well. Not only can you get a year closer to being draft eligible, but you can also face better competition than you're going to face at the high school level while earning NIL money too. So I think there's multiple components where the risk necessarily to going a year early, especially if you're a first, second round type player, there's less risk now than there's ever been because of that fallback. The CBA component is definitely interesting. Either way, these guys, it's tough because how much are they looking at that? I think a little bit, but I don't think it's as big of a deal right now to these guys as it would be if I'm stuck in next year's draft class, for example.
Gotcha. That's fair. All right. Now, let's talk Brewers and Braves. We'll go Braves first because, Dan, I'm going to tee you up and let you hit a home run for all the Brewers fans listening. But this is important because the Brewers select at pick number 25, and the Braves are right behind them. So Brewers have a shallow pool in this draft, so I think that's important to note. But they know what they're doing. We've talked about that at the top of the podcast. It's a really healthy organization, probably the healthiest in all of MLB. But I'm wondering if if they're going to go to battle a little bit and perhaps maybe they have some of the top guys on their board right there in the same tier. The Braves pick at number 9. I think Gio Rojas makes the most sense, especially considering the recent news of Brody Bumila. So Gio makes the most sense for me for the Braves' first pick. But now you get down to 26. I would, to be honest, I'm working through just a sneak preview of my mock that I'm working for you. When I got to this range, I really feel like Eric Becker is one that is going to be penciled in with both organizations as one they're going to circle a profile that they really, each team probably loves. Do you agree? And if so, I mean, how do you see it shaking out there?
Yeah, in terms of both the organizational kind of viewpoints and philosophies when it comes to the draft, both have really done a nice job of either prioritizing typically up the middle type position players if they kind of go that route. The Braves have been a little bit more willing to draft pitching early on as well, where the Brewers really have only drafted position players. But I think, especially if the Braves go Rojas at 9, I think a college guy is definitely more likely, partly because of just the money component and trying to stretch your dollar as far as you can get it through this draft, but also kind of the spot they're selecting to. It's going to be a lot of heavy on college guys being there on the draft board. So I think it's just a lot more likely. I think Eric Becker is one of those guys that falls a little bit under the radar. Really a guy that did a nice job and has produced and is a guy that's going to play an up the middle position in the infield. I think he has a chance to stick at shortstop, kind of a difficult spot obviously to stick at, so he may have to move over to second base, but I think he's a guy that could definitely handle shortstop long term. So I definitely agree that I think both are in play. In terms of the Brewers, I think it's more likely than not they go the college position player route. It would be interesting if, say, like a Cam Flukie fell to them, and would they go that route because of their pitching development system? But I think it's real likely the Brewers go with a college position player. There's a couple high school guys that I think they could stray from and take potentially, depending on how the board shakes out. But right now, with how kind of I view the board shaking, college is likely. One guy I mentioned and that I mocked to them was Spencer's
Strosnader?
Yeah, thank you.
Sawyer.
Yeah. He's one guy I think would be interesting for them to take because he can play center field. I know he played mostly a corner at TCU, but he definitely has a skill set to play center field. And his hit tool could be a little bit better, but I'm not too concerned. I think he just had more of a down year this year. I think he's definitely in play. I like Zion Rose a lot for the Brewers there too. For the Braves, like I said, I think it's likely they go a college position player maybe as well if the board shakes out like I mentioned, and Eric Becker definitely could be in play too.
Well, the Braves organization is a lot more healthy than this time last year than we spoke of. I was there in the draft, at the draft in Atlanta, and maybe that's all it took for them to change course, because year after year it was pitcher heavy at the top, right? And that's what they do well. They lean on pitching in all kinds of different ways, and they are very, very good at developing arms. But they drafted Tate Southesy, and he's already in high A at Rome, doing really well. So and not to mention Eric Hartman, a guy they got pick 616 or something like that at a few drafts ago, and then Juan Yil is developing. What, from your seat, like what do the Atlanta Braves look like in terms of their farm system? Because I feel like it feels a lot different now than even just a year ago.
I agree, and a lot of it has to do with those guys you mentioned. They have historically done a nice job of drafting and developing guys. We're seeing some of that with their pitchers kind of at the top of the organization. But really that last year's draft, I always liked Tate Southesy. I thought he was a really intriguing guy and someone that most teams undervalued throughout the draft process. The Braves obviously didn't think so because they took him in the first round. But I like where this class is when it comes to the Braves prospects. They have a nice healthy balance too with pitching and position players. And if you look a lot at kind of their top prospects, a lot of them are up the middle type players, which I think is really important for organizations. There's just a lot more value in those types of guys when you have a lot of shortstops or center fielders, because they can easily then bounce around to different positions most of the time. Or other teams highly covet those positions as well, because it's really hard to find quality major league shortstops and even center fielders. So I think it's really important that the Braves had a great draft last year, at least as of now. And I'm kind of curious to see. I think, the industry has a pretty strong consensus on Gio Rojas being the guy there at 9. I would be curious to see if they would stray from that, though. I still, like I mentioned earlier, I like Trevor Condon a lot. He's a local kid. I think he would make a lot of sense for them at 9. And again, I really like what he brings to the table. So I know they've been connected to some college position players too. So I'm curious to see where they end up going. But the Braves are in a great spot this year to just add to that farm system even more.
Bill, any last things for Dan before we head out?
I just sit back and listen to you two guys because you guys are the gurus when it comes to the draft, and I know a little bit, but pales in comparison to what you guys know. And one other thing, Logan, I'm disappointed that you haven't mentioned the fact that my Carolina Hurricanes won a Stanley Cup since we last spoke.
Yeah, go Canes. Now Carolina Hurricanes fan by proxy. Dan, you do any of the hockey?
Love hockey. With being in Milwaukee, don't really have a team, but love watching. That's
interesting too. Is there any talk? I'm not a hockey guy, but is there any talk of expansion or putting a team in that neck of the woods?
There always has been in terms of like desire to have a team, but the Blackhawks have like the territory rights. So I think my understanding is the NHL would have to get approval. And I don't know if Milwaukee can support 3 professional teams with the Bucks, Brewers, and an NHL team, especially 2 going on at the same time. I would love it. I think it would be great. I just don't think it's realistic. So
yeah, well, for my Hurricanes, who finished 16-3 in the playoffs, most of the national pundits picked them to go out in the first round against Ottawa. So a lot of crow was eaten by the national guys, and this Carolina team, they were just incredible. They were so consistent all year long, and very much deserved the Stanley Cup.
Definitely. And they had that break too between the Stanley Cup, and that didn't affect them at all. I thought they might come out a little sluggish, but they played well against Vegas. And I don't know what it seemed like people were really high on the Vegas team. And I mean, they played well. I'll give them that. But Carolina, like you said, was just consistent the entire time. And even when their backs were against the wall, they didn't flinch and came out and still won. So,
yep. So it was a heck of a year. And, the thing about the Hurricanes, they've got all those guys re-signed to multi-year contracts, so they're not going anywhere for a while.
Exactly. They've had a nice run. I know they haven't won it all, but they've been consistently competitive for many years now.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Well, Dan, you are consistent with your approach in terms of bringing us MLB Draft content. Folks can check it out at baseballprospectjournal.com. Dan, before you head out, can you provide the listeners with any chatter, nuggets, anything you're willing to share as we inch closer and closer to the draft? We're going to be within 48 hours here soon.
Yeah, I mean, the big question right now is who do the White Sox take number 1? Is it Grady Emerson, the high school shortstop out of Texas, or Roch Chalowski, the shortstop from UCLA? When my mock draft comes out later this week, maybe as soon as on Thursday, it's going to be Roch Chalowski at that first spot. I just think where the White Sox are as an organization, the 2 prospects in general, I think are very comparable, but Chalowski's more polished, more closer to being major league ready. I just think it makes a lot more sense, and I have a feeling the White Sox will go that route, but we'll see come Saturday afternoon.
Awesome stuff. Well, Dan, thanks again for the time. That's it for the 920 podcast, MLB Draft Edition, Part 1. We'll be back with you on the other side.